Yesterday, Donald Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act of, wait for it, 1798, a rarely used authority that's only supposed to apply in times of war or invasion by a foreign country. Now, of course, neither of those things are happening at the moment. But Trump is trying to use the law to immediately deport without the usual due process non-citizens suspected, and that's important, of being members of a Venezuelan gang he accused of unlawfully infiltrating the country. Within hours of that proclamation, a federal judge overseeing a case brought on behalf of 5 Venezuelan migrants expanded a temporary restraining order. His order bars the administration from deporting all non-citizens in U.S. custody that are subject to Trump's proclamation for 14 days. The next hearing in the case is scheduled for Friday. So to help us kind of unpack all of this 1789 nonsense is the one and only Andrew Weissmann, the former general counsel for the FBI. He joins me now. Andrew, I want to take a quick moment to read to you a portion of what the DOJ offers in its appeal to the judge's order. They cite Donald Trump's Article 2 authority as a justification to remove members of this Venezuelan gang, explaining to us that, it's inherent in Article 2 authority to protect the nation. The president may determine that this Venezuelan gang represents a significant risk to the United States and that its members should be summarily removed from this country. Help us understand what that means.
Sure. So this is an incredibly fast-moving story where you have the district judge, as you noted, issuing a temporary restraining order, finding that the Alien Enemies Act from over 2 centuries ago. I tried not to do math in public, but I can do that to say this is over 200 years old. It has been rarely invoked. And there, as you noted, there are all sorts of problems with invoking the statute. We're not at war with Venezuela. We're not at war with the gang that is the subject of the executive order. There is no invasion that is going on. And you also have to show that the people you're removing are actually part of that gang, even if there were an invasion or a war. And this statute may, in fact, be very unconstitutional because it doesn't give due process to those people to challenge that they're not even within the group that the executive order is targeting. And just imagine that. So this is just unilateral executive action with the court not being allowed to hear from somebody about, you know what, I'm not even in that group. So before you actually physically arrest me and remove me from the country, I should have an opportunity to say, this doesn't even apply to me. As you noted, the government has taken a really expansive view of presidential power to say that the president's view of whether we're at war or whether there's an invasion and who is in the group is preclusive, and that the courts should not have a role in hearing this. I think that's really a bridge too far, even for ultimately what will likely be a Supreme Court decision in this area.
So, Andrew, to your point about, an individual saying, yo, wait a minute, time out, I'm not even in this group. According to the ACLU's lawsuit, one of the men who was arrested, was arrested because an immigration officer erroneously believed he was a member of the gang, right? Largely because of his tattoos. It seems like Trump's order, I guess, is opening that door that you're referring to, where people are going to be detained and put through this process based off of a hunch, who may not be a part of this gang or wrapped up in this in any way. Do you see it that way or not?
I do, because look, if at a hearing, the government could show based on witnesses, based on, and it could include, in fact, whether there's tattoos that are unique to or in some way are indicative of what you would have as a member of a particular gang. That could be evidentiary. And so I understand the idea of wanting to take action with respect to members of a violent gang, but in order to do that, you need to know that they in fact are members of a violent gang, and you don't have the government just sweeping people up. This is very reminiscent of the reports that we've heard with respect to the Columbia graduate student, where the reports from his counsel are that when ICE showed up, they said, we revoked his visa, and the lawyer said, he's not here on a visa, he's a lawful permanent resident. The government makes mistakes. That is the reason why you want to have a court hearing where the government has to, before they detain somebody and remove them from the country, have to make a factual showing. I know this may all seem very, very technical and legal, but I really can't stress enough how much it is important to due process of law that we're all entitled to, that you should require the government to make those showings, and it isn't something that the executive should be able to do on its own.
Well, so you're absolutely right to emphasize the due process side of this. And yes, it can be technical and it is very legal, but everybody understands those two words, due process, and we know what it means. So here's the question for you, Andrew. At what point does the Trump administration, in your view, and are we already on this slippery slope, begin to ignore the rulings of judges in these matters that his White House is deeming that he has superiority by virtue of being the chief executive of the country?
Well, there's very disturbing reporting in the New York Times just this morning suggesting, not concluding, but suggesting that that may in fact have happened. And that Judge Boasberg, the trial court judge who issued this temporary restraining order and said, you can't remove people. And he also said, to the extent that their planes in the air, they need to come back. You cannot remove people because I'm finding that this is improper. It's unclear at this point whether, in fact, that order was complied with. The doomsday scenario for this country is the idea that you would just ignore a court order. At that point, there is no rule of law in this country. Yeah. You're a law of the jungle. So that's a thing to keep an eye on as to whether that in fact happened here.